the contracts won by white men through the program actually totals almost as much as those won by 6 other demographic groups combined, and those are more of the groups that were intended to benefit from the program. Next slide, please. This slide shows another interesting piece of evidence that we gathered, which was that of all the participants in the program throughout its lifetime, more than half, 58%, never actually won a contract through the program. Next slide, please. So the next thing I want to talk about with the Prime Contractor Development Program is, in a way, it actually acts as a barrier to greater contracting equity. And that's part of what this chart shows. So if you look at the top bar, it's showing the number of currently certified construction companies. There's maybe 900 companies. So if you compare that to the number of companies that are currently in the Prime Contractor Development Program, 27, there's a big decrease from 900 down to 27. And then you compare that to the bottom line, you can see that of the current 27 participants in the Prime Contractor Development Program, only 10 have ever won a contract by participating in the program. And in our professional judgment, illustrates an equity barrier, because you have a large certified construction firms that are at the top of nearly 900, but only a small portion of those have actually been given access to bid on those city contracts. And of those that have access, less than half of them have actually won a job, gotten experience through the program, generated a bit of wealth. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we looked at during the audit is whether procurement throughout the lifetime of the program, and there's mentioning that the program is almost 10 years old. But one of the things we looked at is whether procurement has followed some of the relevant rules. And as I said earlier, the program worked by bidding contracts $1 million under to certified firms, and there are exceptions to this, where a contract can be bid on the open market. There are narrow criteria for doing that, and a bureau has to demonstrate a good reason why contracts should be awarded outside of the program. And what we found is that actually of the program eligible contracts, there was about $33 million in contracts bid outside the program. But for many of these, intended by the blue lines, there actually wasn't approval to do this. And on the next slide, we sort of highlight the bureaus that are actually awarding more contracts award on the open market without approval than with approval. And we want to sort of call out that doing this actually did violate the rules that are in place for the program, but on sort of another level, it also took away opportunity to do millions of dollars of jobs from certain firms. On the next slide, we'll talk about a couple of other issues that we wanted to raise. So first, there was some wasted funds that we found with this program, and it mainly dealt with technical assistants and consultants. The spending on technical assistance was arbitrary. Some companies appeared to get a lot of assistance, others didn't get any. And there was spending of tens of thousands of dollars on technical assistance for companies that were not eligible for that help because they weren't actually a member of the program. And procurement also spent $230,000 buying a training program that didn't appear to help participants and was marketed as providing a graduate degree when it did not. And procurement also spent money on consultants in ways that the public probably would hope they did not. For example, we found that a retired staffer was hired back as a consultant after moving to Wisconsin. Another consultant was hired after, despite an apparent conflict of interest. And another consultant was awarded a $500,000 contract in violation of city rules. And with monitoring, what we found through the audit evidence was that procurement didn't effectively keep track of what was going on with the prime contractor development program. There wasn't an accurate master list of program participants. There wasn't an accurate list of spending on the technical assistance. There wasn't tracking of the companies that were doing well versus the companies that needed help. And in addition, when City Council created this program, they directed procurement to set specific goals, but the goals were never set. And Council directed procurement to give regular progress updates back to the City Council, but that didn't happen either, except in one case. Next slide, please. I'll just give you a moment to read this quote. So you might think that this quote saying that there's not a well-defined focus, goals aren't consistently understood, there's some program weaknesses. You might think this quote is from the audit that we just released, but it's not. It's actually taken from our office's audit of the prime contractor development program's predecessor, the sheltered market program, which was an audit we published 10 years ago. And so I'm just calling this out because some of these issues that we found with prime contractor development program, these problems existed a decade ago and they're still around today. So next, we'll talk about the recommendations on the next slide. We recommend procurement to expand access to contracting opportunities for certified firms, and the way it can do that here is by removing some of the barriers we've identified. And what that looks like, we recommend that procurement award contracts $1 million and under to certified firms. Well, just like that. You don't have to have the program in front of it. You just make it a contracts is that you're certified. And so that removes a couple of hoops that a company might have to jump through. Next thing we recommend is that procurement eliminate these ineffective the evidence we reviewed showed that procurement wasn't really able to make these technical assistance programs work. They weren't able to monitor them, and City Council has assigned these duties to Prosper Portland, the economic development agency. And so our recommendation is that procurement just give that responsibility to Prosper Portland. The next recommendation is that procurement set an aspirational goal for use of certified prime contractors. As Elizabeth said earlier in the presentation, there's strong evidence that setting a goal actually does increase equity, and that staff at the city do try hard to meet these goals. There's already a goal for use of subcontractors and a diverse workforce, and so we recommend that there's one for prime contractors as well. Last thing, we just recommend that procurement continue following rules for bidding contracts on the open market, and only do that when there's a good reason and make sure that it's documented. On the next slide, we'll talk about another section of the audit, which is we looked at some more process-oriented stuff excuse me, around kind of what we classify as contracting integrity issues. We'll talk about collusion, or sometimes called bid rigging, project bundling, and state certification. And then we'll talk about the recommendations. So first, briefly on collusion. The city has anti-collusion provisions in its contracts, and anyone who bids signs them. But procurement doesn't really enforce those provisions, and we did find opportunities where companies could violate them. For example, relatives who own separate companies might bid on the same contracts, which provides an opportunity to collude on the bid, and that would violate the anti-collusion affidavit. The next is project bundling. And bundling is the process of tying together separate but related projects in order to achieve efficiency. And that can save money, but it also affects contract equity if the bundling is used to keep projects out of the ranges of equity programs. In 2012, the City Council directed procurement to create a criteria to identify and eliminate bundling, but procurement did not. And lastly, on certification, we found that procurement officials and aware of allegations of state certification fraud, but they didn't act on them. And there is a process to investigate this, but it wasn't used. So on the next slide, we'll talk about a couple of specific instances of certification issues that we identified. I think it's important to note that while we found potential issues, we're not accusing any people or companies of breaking the law. We have, however, based on some additional information about these situations to procurement and the city attorney's office for investigation. So just quickly, a couple of examples. First, we found a company that was an emerging small business, graduated from that certification, and then reformed itself under a new name, apparently to qualify again for emerging small business status. Next, we found a woman-owned company that did more than $2 million in jobs as a subcontractor for a company that the woman's father owned. That on its own isn't necessarily problematic, but we found that the state certification office had initially declined to certify this company, and later noted that they determined the company had violated the law around certifications, didn't act any further on it. And lastly, we found a person who has two companies. One is a certified firm, one is not, and they attempted to have the non-certified firm subcontract with the certified firm, which in essence would be to hire themselves as a subcontractor. So in effect, this that we want to note is that, if there is in fact potential certification issues taking place, it can cause legitimately certified firms to lose out on contracting opportunities, which is something the city doesn't want to have happen. So on the next slide, we'll talk about the recommendations for these items. The first recommendation is that we recommend procurement appoint a procurement inspector, and that would be sort of a new innovative thing, but it would be a person who can monitor, investigate, and report to management and the public on all types of purchasing issues, whether it's certification complaints, whether it's just are the rules being followed on any city procurement issues or projects. The next thing we recommend is that procurement collect data on the prices that are submitted for bid items, which would allow it to monitor for collusion. And the last thing is we recommend procurement create criteria to prevent bundling as the city council directed. So now I'll hand it back over to Elizabeth.
Thanks, Gordon. So next we're going to talk about communication and perceptions of favoritism. Procurement staff worked hard to build relationships with organizations such as the National Association of Minority Contractors and the Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs. But in prioritizing relationships with some organizations, others and their members felt left out. There was also an inconsistent approach to sharing information about upcoming projects. For example, some procurement staff members introduced select minority contractors to high-level bureau staff, but these introductions may have created expectations the city couldn't act on. Bureau staff said they were not able to act on introductions due to the need to provide equal access to all contractors. The disconnect between access on one hand and the reluctance to act on it on the other may have left contractors wondering if some people had special access they did not. The lack of a uniform approach to information sharing frustrated some contractors who told us that the city played favorites while providing special access to information. Procurement tried to mitigate the perception that some contractors had privileged access to information about upcoming projects by creating an online list, but the list was not updated for more than a year. Bureaus listed some projects on their own websites, but information provided didn't include the details contractors needed for planning, and procurement staff agreed that more transparent project planning would make contracting fairer. To address issues of, yes.
There's a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to go through your whole presentation first and then address those, or do you want to address that now?
I think it might be easier for me if I could just go through, if that's okay, everyone. We are trying to leave time until at the end for questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
So we are recommending that procurement centralize outreach and create formal outreach procedures to ensure fairness to all participating contractors. And we are also saying that all staff performing outreach to certified firms should report to the Chief Procurement Officer. We'd also like to see formalized tracking of project communications from staff and regular assessment of whether communications are fair and transparent. And we'd like procurement to ensure that bureaus post upcoming projects on procurement website. The next thing we want to talk about is some of the information that procurement reports and how it could help to build capacity in diverse workforce and contractors. So we touched on procurement's equity goals in an earlier slide, but procurement didn't do a good job of reporting progress towards these goals. In addition to not providing reports since 2017 and inconsistent reporting prior to that, it also didn't do a good job of providing information to council and bureau decision makers that could be used to improve equity outcomes. For example, until last spring, it didn't disaggregate data on workforce. So this is some of that disaggregated data. The city is meeting its goal of having more than 20% of workforce on job sites being apprentices, but there are disparities within the data. So 50% of the Black workers are at the apprentice level, and 36%, did I get that wrong? My labels are wrong on my chart. 36% of women workers are at the apprentice level. This may indicate that Black and women workers are having trouble transitioning from the apprentice stage to full-time workers. Women and people of color are also disproportionately working in lower wage positions like flaggers and laborers. Women make up 57% of flaggers, but only 8% of the workforce overall. People of color make up 36% of laborers, but only 16% of equipment operators. And just to put that in context, flaggers make about $31 per hour, laborers make about $36 per hour, and equipment operators make $58 per hour. Procurement also didn't report on known barriers to increasing contractor diversity at the city. Both bureau and procurement staff were well aware that certain types of projects had few certified contractors to compete for work, including paving, park trail work in sensitive areas, cured-in-place pipe, and fiber optic cable. A lack of certified contractors was the primary reason for the exemptions we talked about in the Prime Contractor Development Program, but it also led to exemptions from the subcontractor equity goals. Procurement did not report these barriers, and the city did little to develop capacity among certified contractors to perform this work. In order to increase diversity of people and contractors working on projects, the city sets aside 1% of construction project costs for workforce training and technical support for contractors. But the programs funded by this money have moved in fits and starts. The city first started this program in a 2012 pilot program that allocated funds for specific projects. But an evaluation of that program found high overhead costs, limited impacts on the demographics of workers, and that program was susceptible to conflicts of interest. In 2018, the city created a Community Opportunities and Enhancement Program to pool funds for all projects and disperse grants through a standing committee. The city requested applications from organizations and received 39, but then decided not to award any grants. In 2020, 2 years after it was first created, the city moved the program to Prosper Portland. Prosper Portland began implementing the program after our audit period ended, so its work was not included in this review. Though the agreement with Prosper Portland provides a better mechanism for oversight, success of the program is not guaranteed. Budget projections for the program may have been overly rosy. The program projections were about 1.3 million in grants annually, but that projection did not consider that construction projects funded by bonds, utility, and gas tax revenue were restricted by law and may be unavailable or impractical for use with a grants program. The City Budget Office said in February that the actual amount of money available for the program was unknown. Given the unknown variables and past program failures, it's especially important for Prosper Portland to issue progress reports as required by the agreement, chiefly those that measure equity outcomes. And it's also important for procurement to carefully evaluate and act upon the information provided in the reports if necessary. Our recommendations for overcoming barriers and growing capacity are that procurement should produce reports on the city's progress towards contractor equity goals, including the use of disaggregated data when it helps explain barriers for subgroups. Use overall progress and post-project reports to identify trends and lessons learned that can be used to inform technical assistance and workforce grants or to develop new policies. And that it should implement the oversight steps outlined in the agreement with Prosper Portland, including obtaining all required performance evaluations and progress reports. And that it should evaluate the results of grant awards on growth in the construction market and report information to council. Like I said earlier, we have more information in our report, which is available online. It's at portlandoregon.gov/audit-services/equity contracting. There are also a couple of places to look for online interactive data. So we put together information on the subcontractor equity program. That's available at portlandoregon.gov/audit-services/contracting-4. Procurement has also put up an interactive report of workforce data, and that is available at portlandoregon.gov/BRFS/42255. You're also welcome to email either me or Gordon, and we can talk more about the audit. We both like talking about our work, so please feel free to reach out to us. I also want to make two other plugs. We run a fraud hotline to investigate fraud, waste, and abuse at the city, and we take tips from members of the public about wrongdoing performed by city staff or contractors. You can make a report at portlandfraudhotline.com. We're also always looking for new ideas for audits and trying to make our reports more relevant to members of the public. So this audit came from a suggestion from a member of the public, and we appreciate you sharing your ideas at portlandoregon.gov/audit-services/70028. And just to close before we open for questions, we reviewed Portland's contracting equity programs at a systems level to see how they work together, with a deeper dive into the prime contractor development program and the subcontractor equity program. Though procurement was meeting the goals it was given, we documented problems such as a lack of oversight, missing goals, and poor record keeping that caused continuing equity barriers. We gave procurement 16 evidence-based recommendations that will fix these problems and increase opportunities for workers and contractors. We hope that you'll continue your involvement and oversight of these programs to help ensure that the city continues to strive to increase diversity among construction contractors and workforce. And with that, open up for comments. I don't know, Mary, are you going to handle sort of facilitating who's asking questions?
Sure. So Rosa Martinez has asked, what is the city doing to hold staff accountable to these findings? And the second question, why are they still working at the city?
So we make our recommendations to management. So I think that would be a question for either Lester or Michelle.
Yeah, sorry, I just had to unmute myself. So the auditor's office is meeting with City Council on October 22nd to review this and a couple other performance audits that they've done, and then as a result of that, we'll put together a plan to implement all of the recommendations. To the latter part of your question, it's not my understanding that staff lose their jobs as a result of the audits. So, we're going to do our best to improve, and so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, this is Michelle. I'll just say a couple things. With the Office of Management and Finance and our CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, Tom Reinhardt, we put together responses to the findings. So part of the audit report, in the back of the audit report, is a result of our responses. For each one are already listed out. So we do have plans in place. Some of the plans are already being implemented, such as the COEP rules are already scheduled to go to council next month. So there's a variety of ways in which we're responding. It's also very important to keep in mind that over the past 10 years, the management of procurement and these programs has changed a few times. And so the city does take seriously its role in monitoring and taking seriously allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse of its employees. But that would be done through the personnel rules. And so if you read the specific recommendations and the specific responses, you can see that no city employee is being accused of anything that would be illegal. And I would look to Gordon and Elizabeth
Call
to
from
confirm
wireless
that
caller.
last sentence.
Hello?
That is true. In the
Hello?
I guess I should have broken up.
Yeah.
Answers to the question.
Hey, Michael, I'm on a Zoom right now. Can I call you back, or you want to? It's something real urgent.
But it is true. We did make our
check
audits
an
of
email I sent you to see if it's okay for me to send to Meredith.
Michael, go ahead and send that email to Meredith. I don't even need to look at it. I'll give you the green light. I'm serious.
Okay, great. I'll
Okay.
copy you with it.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead, man.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.
I'd like to, I don't know which person put their hand up first, but I'd like to start with Maurice, and then the second person will be James Posey. If you want to go ahead, Maurice, and voice your question.
Yes, my question, and there's two parts of it. I know the auditor's office has a lot of ability to look into what the city's doing. One of the recommendations of moving technical assistance over to Prosper Portland. I know you have a less of a view of what they are capable of doing. So how are we going to ensure that this doesn't reoccur without the oversight of the auditor's office? That's one question. The other question is, when you talked about a graduate's degree and the $230,000 that an organization got, that impacts, of course, negatively the businesses that thought that they were going to have a degree. This is for the city. Are you concerned that there might be a lawsuit of someone that was intending to get a degree, then finding out that they don't have a degree? And also, has the city looked at recouping those dollars back because the services that you were contracted out to do wasn't provided to the recipients?
I can answer the first question about Prosper Portland, because we do actually have oversight over Prosper Portland, similar to what we have the city. So right now, I'm actually working on a audit of Prosper Portland, looking at the grants they're providing for COVID-19. So we can still audit those programs and they move over to the city as well. But we're also hoping that procurement and the Office of Management and Finance step up and provide oversight as well, because there are provisions in the agreement with Prosper Portland for having Office of Management and Finance playing some oversight role. It's money coming from city bureaus, city projects, and it needs to build capacity going back related to those projects. So we hope that the city still plays some role in oversight over those programs. And then for the graduate degree, I don't know if Gordon, do you want to provide more details on that?
Sure. Kelly had asked what the program was. It was called the Streetwise MBA program, and not to ding the program. It may have been helpful for some people. The evidence we reviewed indicated it may not have been a great fit for construction-related programs, since it was more sort of about business marketing. It was just one of those things where in the materials that procurement put together to try and advertise it to participants, procurement did say that it would participants would get an MBA upon completion of the program. We don't know the intent behind saying that. It may have been just an honest mistake, but it was something that was told to the participants, and it was quite an expensive program at $230,000. I think, Maurice, if I can try and also address the second part of the question about the other issues with technical assistance. We tried to call out some of the specific instances just to really try and illustrate, not just say, oh, there's an issue, but kind of show what it looks like, and hopefully that can help procurement, with our recommendations to understand a little bit how they might want to look for things in the future, sort of a recommendation to management. So.
Okay. We want to go ahead and recognize James Posey, and then we'll get to your question, Memphis.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. First of all, let me just thank the auditor's office and Gordon and Ms. Pape. You all are to be commended. You all, I just don't really know what to say. Without this sort of audit of what's been going on, we would still be, whistling Dixie, talking about everything is wonderful and okay. So I am certainly glad that you all were able to put together this report. And really, it's such a sad commentary. 10 years ago, in that shelter market program, many of these issues were identified, and it's such a sad thing. So my question to you is, did you all look at the community benefits agreements that were touted as the savior for many of these sort of issues, what impact they may have had on this thing? Secondly, what's real clear is in the procurement office, it appears as if you want them to do everything, and particularly Stacey Edwards, working in that office. I want to know how many people does she have to monitor and administer this program? Because typically when you set these programs up, they're programs that are set up to fail if you don't have enough resources or staff to be able to implement what you're trying to do. And so, although no one is pointing any fingers, the truth of the matter is, for over the last several decades, these programs have been designed to fail because of the absence of resources to make them work. And then finally, is there any provisions in which the auditor's office could be an inspector or an ongoing prioritized avenue by which you all could go look at your work again within a reasonable period of time to make sure these things are being implemented, and that we won't be off track for another 10 years before we find out things are going awry. And then I said, finally, you know, I'm having a hard time understanding how we could have a program for 10 years of trying to focus on minorities and white guys get all the resources to get the majority of a program. It's almost like they're getting 90%, 95% of the work already, and when you design a program that will help 5% of the people, then that also goes to white guys. So they're getting 99 or maybe 100% of all the resources. And then the issue of now that we've been hurt by these 10 years, we're behind. This is not a static process. People who have been in this industry working for years, and they're not getting opportunities. They're not on a competitive level with all the white guys who have been making book the whole time. So is there anything to talk about to address that? So anyway, I got more stuff to ask, but this is crazy.
Okay, well, James, if you want to talk more offline, we can certainly talk again, and I appreciate your involvement in your comments. I will try to address them briefly here. So we didn't look in depth at the community benefits agreement. I know there was a lot of interest from members of the public of looking at that part of the program. It seemed to us to be a moving target. The city was just hadn't yet implemented the resolution, the newest version of the resolution that would guide those community benefit agreements. They're only for projects, forget what the amount is.
25 million and over.
They're only for very large projects, so there aren't a whole lot of them anyway. So we were, it was going to be difficult for us to look at that program as it was new without and identify trends, because there just wouldn't be that many projects to look at. So that was scoped out of our audit. But I know that there's a lot of interest in looking at that. And to look at what resources were available to the prime contractor development program, you know, we didn't really look at whether or not there were enough resources devoted to the program, but we did look at sort of some of the business practices and just the kind of oversight you would typically want to see over a program like that. And we found that there was room for improvement. I guess thinking about whether that could have changed with more resources, I guess there's a potential for that, but we didn't really see that as a cause as much as the lack of goals that were there guiding the program, lack of reporting, lack of accountability, and this some kind of just oversight mistakes and errors that we saw over the contracting, especially. Did you have anything else?
Well, I just want to say, you all got Tom Reinhardt, who I think is Michelle's boss, and he gets on the media and starts talking about BLM, Black Lives Matter. That's hypocrisy for him to be doing that, talking about Black Lives Matter when people out here in the streets that got unemployment rates triple that of white folk, And that doesn't translate into any more resources or policies that's going to really change the course of how this falls out. And if you don't have competent people, Michelle, they fired, Tom Reinhardt fired your boss. He fired your predecessor, which really threw everything into a tailspin around these programs. That's a shame. That's the inconsistent, incompetent part on the people who are administering these programs at the city that's at fault at these programs.
I want to get back to your third question because I thought it was a good one and it speaks to our processes. You asked whether or not our office could act as that inspector position that we were recommending. And we can't really do that. We need to maintain our independence and act as, we can't provide any sort of ongoing oversight. So that's not a role that we can play, which is why we recommended it to that procurement build that capacity within the office. But one difference between this audit and the one that we did 10 years ago and one we did a few years ago on procurement is we really are paying more attention to doing follow-ups now, and we are issuing public reports at 1 year and 2 year on the status of our recommendations, and those are going out every couple months to our mailing list, and we also post them online. And we've been really pleased with the process, and we see bureaus making progress towards implementing our recommendations. So, so we are really hoping that in a year from now we will be able to report some good work from procurement on our recommendations.
So why would you recommend that the wolf count the chickens in the chicken coop? Why wouldn't you have an independent somebody out there looking at these programs that's not accountable to the procurement office? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I think oversight of these programs is a role that management should play, and we'll still have our sort of outside oversight role, but on a day-to-day basis, that's something they should be doing.
This is Michelle. I would just like to add that I hope you will give us an opportunity to share the developing plan to address the findings and to make overall improvements to the program. Like the auditor started out by saying, many of the goals were met. And that said, though, we recognize there's still improvements to be made. We have a developing plan to make improvements. We're going to involve stakeholders, you all, in the decisions that will create a more effective program. And so we need to have the opportunity to share all that with you. We can't do that today, obviously, but I want to let you know that we are serious about making improvements and involving stakeholders in the improvements to the programs, to the suite of programs. So I just hope you'll give us a chance.
Elizabeth, do you mind if I address another element of James's question, sort of on the disparity study issue he kind of hinted at? You know, we did some research on how the city operates in sort of the constraints that the Supreme Court has placed on governments all around the country when you have programs that deal with issues of race and gender. And you know, you had asked why white men were able to win contracts through the Prime Contractor Development Program, and ultimately it was a call that management made when the program was created, that they could not have a program that excluded white men from bidding. And you know, at the state level, white men can be certified as emerging small businesses, and so that was the sort of the way that the city approached implementing the program. Council, however, when it passed the legislation that created the program, in the legislation it did say specifically the program was to award contracts to women and people of color. It's just one of those constraints on the city with the disparity study, which is a whole other topic of conversation.
Well, only thing I can say is you guys are smart enough to send a man to the moon, but you're not smart enough to design these programs that will benefit the people who are most effectively impacted. And I've been watching you all use that disparity study and the Supreme Court stuff for as long as I've been around, but you're smart enough to do a lot of things, but this particular problem you can't overcome, and just so happens that it benefits white men, which it's very curious to me. These whole programs got started with those riots back in Watts, and now we're coming full circle with riots right here in Portland around this kind of stuff, and you still haven't figured it out. One of these days, you all will be able to come up with a solution that will allow these programs to go to the communities that they were designed to help, rather than to give in to everybody. And please stop using the excuse of the Supreme Court and all these other barriers that you all talk about, because it won't fly anymore. And these people in the streets are trying to tell you that.
And James, that's one of the reasons why in the report we make a recommendation that procurement actually come to a group like the Fair Contracting Forum to set a goal for whether it's use of minority certified primes, women certified primes, because there is strong evidence that when the city sets those goals, they either meet them or get real close.
Well, the sad thing about it is we haven't even seen the disaggregated numbers. So we're trying to get at the people who have been hurt the most. So why don't you all, when you have an audit, put those numbers up front rather than us devolving into trying to figure out with these overall roles that include white guys. We're not really talking about white guys here. These programs are designed for people of color. Put those numbers up front to show where the disparities are clear and distinctly. Then we will get a sense that we're doing the right thing for the right reasons. Damn it.
We did we can't include all of the data in our reports and certainly not in our presentations, but we do have those, both us and procurement have put some disaggregated data online. So it's there.
Well, I would just advise you all to put those numbers up front, because those are really the nub of where we're trying to go with these programs. And for you to talk about the overall thing and then not hide, but have it subliminal, so some people have to look for it, this disaggregated data. That's not a good thing. We're trying to get at the hub of where these problems are failing. So put the disparity and the disaggregated numbers up front so we can see those things, and put a flashing light on them so we'll know we got to change these situations.
So I'm just going to jump in here, James, and prior to the audit, Procurement Services was working on an annual report. We want to do something every year. And we are going to be producing something with disaggregated data. And, to the point made in the audit, we hope to be able to use the disaggregated data to inform what we need to do differently in the future so we don't continue to have the disparities that have shown up in the past. So we've been working hard using the similar application as the auditor's office to provide sort of an interactive dashboard of data, but also breaks it down to the most disaggregated level. So I just want to put a plug in for that. And I do want to say that we have some folks on here that are guests to the forum that are here to talk about the second agenda topic. So we only have 20 minutes left on the agenda. So if everyone's okay, I'd like to move on to the second agenda topic. My Zoom just dropped, so I'm only on the telephone. So the second agenda topic today is, can everyone still hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, my video dropped, sorry. So there was an egregious act on a public work site earlier this year. It was a project that Portland State University was the lead on, but there were several funding partners. We were one of them. You're all probably familiar with the incident. And as a result of that, there was a call to action by Maui. And they sent a letter to the public owners, and Maui stands for the Metropolitan Alliance for Workforce Equity, for those who may not be familiar. So it's a call to action to prevent egregious acts like that from happening again. And when we received the letter, we took it very seriously. We were both looking into remedies that we potentially had as a funding partner on that project that PSU was the lead for, as well as looking at all of our existing policies, contractual documents, and requirements of contractors. And as we started to formulate a response, I just wanted to inform the Maui group and this group at large. We were going sort of request by request, and we were sort of addressing what we have done or what we are doing or what we're contributing to with the Construction Careers Pathways Project. That's the Metro-led C2P2 group that's referenced in the letter. And after we had an initial draft, it was just sort of point by point and very long. So our communications folks thought that it would be best to issue sort of a more generic response, but committed to us discussing it at this meeting with the Fair Contracting Board. And I just wanted to say that we had a conversation with an informal conversation with Sam Ranfeast and others and Michael from the PSEP committee to talk about, as PSEP starts to look at their process, what can they use that we're already using, or what can they do to prevent this happening on one of their job sites. And I think, one thing that we talked about is we're actively involved in this C2P2 work group. And right now we're at a point where we're collectively negotiating a project labor agreement. We're working with all of the other public owners, and we're also having sessions with the unions and contractor groups to come up with something that everybody can agree to. And a lot of what is recommended in the Maui letter, is something that is covered in that project labor agreement. And some of the things that aren't, are already in our documents. But one of the things we wanted to be careful not to do is just to have a sort of knee-jerk reaction. I mean, we could put a lot of things on paper, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have an impact or it's going to be sustainable. So, I think what we wanted to do is we're happy to sort of provide a response to all of these recommendations and just, reference something we have existing, but we don't want to just take action for the sake of responding. We want to take action to actually impact change. So, we were hoping to engage this group to figure out what are some of the things that maybe we're not doing today that we could do ahead of the C2P2 group, or, would the industry, is that the goal, is for us to continue to work together with that group and create sort of this public owner standard that everybody adheres to? So I wanted to sort of create an open dialogue here with everyone, see what we can do to address those, but also sort of acknowledge that we're sort of actively working with a group of government agencies to do some of this and to effectuate some of the change that we're hoping to achieve. So I know Kelly, Maurice, you are both members of Maui. I want to give you an opportunity to chime in too, but I just wanted to introduce the topic to everybody.
Well, I could let Kelly, if you want to just give a brief summary, and then we could dive in on what we're looking at achieving.
Yeah, sure. So we have been working with on the industry side more, not so much on the owner side, a task force around addressing job site culture, and we've finalized a pledge that industry, like contractors, labor, trade associations, and apprenticeship programs are signing on to And then on October 1st, there's going to be a convening where a committee that's been reviewing various trainings is actually going to report out to the region on our findings and make recommendations in an attempt to standard sort of regional alignment, similar to safety trainings. How do we make this something that everybody, no matter what job site you go on, what trade you're working with, which contractor you work for, that there's a set of standards around job site culture and prevention of harassment and bullying and hazing. So that isn't really, it's not really owned by Maui or anybody. It's sort of everybody's working together on that right now. So AGC, PBDG, the union, the trade, everyone's kind of all in, and anyone who doesn't know about that that's on this call, I invite you to join us. So if you have questions or want to get involved, I'm happy to talk about all of that, because we do need everybody in the industry to be a part of this. I think on the owner side, we're planning this convening with Metro, and so I know Tiffany Thompson has been reaching out to interested owners to develop a similar commitment document or something where you all are able to work together to, and I think those 11 points in the Maui letter are a starting point, but I think, each of you will want to do your due diligence around what makes sense. I think as owners, there's a lot that you all can do to influence what your GCs do and how they have standards on their job sites. So I think there is a ton of opportunity to take better control. And yeah, our list in the letter was an initial thinking. We sent that out to about 25 organizations to co-create that list. So it was informed by pre-apprenticeship programs, by minority subcontractors, by labor unions around what they felt like owners could do, and with sort of national best practices in mind of what people on task force across the country have seen work. But I don't know if there's much more that I should do for background. I can put the link for the October 1st event in the chat for anyone who wants to RSVP. And that's just kind of the work at the regional level that we're working on to address this.
Thank you, Kelly. One of the things, and so what is the purpose of this? It is to align both apprenticeship programs, both union and non-union, contractors, subcontractors, and the workers, to actually have a series of initiatives. So this is the first step in order to have less bullying and harassment occur, and to eventually eliminate it entirely, but to have less of it occur on job sites, and to have people be held accountable for when they do an act of bullying or harassment. So we are looking at the owners. The owners can put stuff in their requests from general contractors and their general contractors and have that flow down. So we're looking for input from everybody, and we're looking at a solution-based approach. We recognize that we can yell and scream and say this stuff should never happen on any project, but if we don't have a solution-based approach to come up with how are we going to come up with a remedy, we're just going to be beating our fists or our head up against the wall all day long. So this is our attempt to do a solution-based approach to get to the heart of the issue, correct it, and to have projects similar to the courthouse project that Multnomah County did, where you've got to see women and minorities holding their heads up high, not looking at the ground, just look at the ground, just go to work, but their heads were held up high, they were smiling, they were engaged, because we changed the culture of how a construction site looks and views women and minorities. So that's what we're trying to do on a much grander level, but we need everyone at the table to give their input and their suggestions on how to get there. Thank you for the time.
Hey Maurice, what did Multnomah County do? What did they do specifically to create that positive culture?
Yeah, they had a lot of different programs. They had the Green Dot program. They had a lot of diversity across trades, so you got to see women and minorities in leadership positions on the job site. They were foremen or superintendents. but they had intervention training, and so they had built a culture in which empowered people to act. And a lot of times what happens is, people see something on the job site and they don't want to make waves, right? And they don't know how to act to, someone saying something that's inappropriate or someone doing something that is questionable. And so what they did is they gave a lot of the employees, the foremen, and everyone that wanted to pay, gave them tools to act and tools to diffuse situations and tools to confront bad behavior. So if someone's drawing a swastika on the wall, right? They gave people the ability to act in their certain way to mitigate the problem, mitigate the issue. If they saw someone being mistreated, gave them tools to act. So it was all about learning and also creating more of that community of contractors and community of workers. So they really bought into that we're all here together to work to better our families. So it really gave majority of people on the job site the ability to say, hey, I could stand up for this person. It gave other people that ability. And once you saw that kind of shift in mentality, what you saw is that people were able to be themselves. You saw a lot more smiling on projects. You saw a lot more people engaged. Because there is a lot of times on projects you'll end up with trades going, the plumbers over here, the electricians over here, and they all get their own little silos and camps. This broke down those silos to allow. But yeah, so I think a good thing would have like either Jerry is a good person with Hoffman to talk about it a little bit, Justin as well, but you definitely felt it when you walked on that job site, the inclusiveness.
James got his hand up, PJ.
Yeah, far be it for me to try to tell Maui Nam what to do, but I've been a contractor and I've been harassed on these jobs and so forth. And it seems to me that we could take a lesson from the NFL. When we saw these coaches walking around without masks on, all of a sudden they get hit with $100,000 fine. I guarantee you their behavior is going to change on the next game. I guarantee you the team hits with $200,000 fine. This is simple stuff. People financially, if they're hurt by these sort of crazy actions, there are sanctions. They can't get on a bidding list. I mean, come on, guys. This is not hard. Just find these folk until their behavior changed so they could conform to human beings. And why are we making a big deal out of this? Do the right thing. Make it hurt and watch their behavior change. Trust me on this.
And I think we've actually talked about that, James, and that's a good point. The thing is that if a company fires an individual, that individual can go to another company and continue to do the same process. We want to be able to identify, empower people to be able to then turn around and say, okay, this is unacceptable. 99% or maybe 90%, I'm not going to go 99%, but 90% of people really want to do the right thing. So we got to empower those people to do the right thing, squeeze out that 10% that doesn't want to do the right thing. And we want to hold everyone accountable so that if we can hold everyone accountable, not only just the contractor accountable or the subcontractor accountable, but the employees accountable as well. So we want to make sure that it's accountability all the way down the stream. So the owners, the contractors, the subcontractors, the employees, the journeyman, the apprentice, down the list. So everyone has that accountability.
Well, again, it might be a combination of things, but this is subliminal stuff that you all are talking about. Fairly few people know about it. The KKK and all these groups, they're on a watch list. Put a watch list off so they can't move from company to company. Make it more public. Have people go to in safety. People who do well on safety get rewarded. People who are doing bad on safety, their safe ratings go down, they got to pay more money. This is simple human behavior stuff, a combination of all. Let's put up a web page to show people who are not doing the right thing and really describe these issues. Let's have a group that discusses these things across. We're doing Zoom here. Why don't we have a Zoom discussion about these companies that are doing these things? So this is stuff that, common sense will make this work.
Well, we look forward to your input, James. So Kelly had mentioned the event that we're having. So we want everyone to be engaged in this, because this will only better the entire community. So look forward to your input, suggestions, so that we can move this forward.
Yeah, my main thing is the people with the power. Lester, the city of Portland should not tolerate this. They should make it known. There should be a policy. Why spend all our time when people are working? You trying to do electrical work. I was trying to do paving. Why do we have to spend all our time worrying about things that are no-brainers, that the owner should take responsibility for and make it happen? This is not necessary to do all this busy work around this issue.
Ramsey has his hand up, so I want to make time for him to his hand up for a little bit.
I just want to thank the lively discussion on this. I think as a PSEF committee member, we had brought this discussion within the PSEF committee, and I think we kind of applaud. I personally applaud. I think Maui's approach around being solutions oriented and getting many stakeholders to have this conversation. And I think from the PSEF committee, I think we just felt that the city of Portland as an owner, has a huge responsibility. I think to James's point, I think it's really important that the city does take leadership on this, and I think there are many lessons I think we at PSEF could learn if procurement takes leadership and implements recommendations that many community stakeholders are providing. That would be a value to help keep contractors, keep those parties accountable, but also making work sites safe. And I think as a committee member, some of the lessons we hope that we can learn and apply is as we're funding projects throughout Portland with potentially little oversight, that we are being proactive and learning what the city is doing here. So I don't want to speak for staff, but I do hope that there are much collaboration and much inclusion of staff, and the city can again be a leader in pushing other owners, so we don't catch ourselves at a future project finding ourselves powerless to do something, because again I think the city has great power. So I'll pause there, but I just wanted to sort of issue just just echo some of the statements from our committee members, that I think we believe it's time that we address harassment at our construction site, and I think it's time for leaders to lead on this issue and hold parties accountable.
Thanks, Ramsey. Kelly?
Yeah, thanks, Ramfis and James and Maurice. There was another incident last week at the Adidas job site of a swastika drawn on the inside of a porta potty. So this is not a one-time thing, and I think there's decades and decades of this, and I think it's up to all of us to hopefully meet the moment. And I think I agree with everything James said. I mean, if contractors listen to money talks, and so as much as owners can be more aggressive with this kind of stuff, I mean, it will, I think, save us a lot of time. But if you think about the safety culture, that's what really started to change it. Was insurance policies, but also just safety regulations, and that can fall into, it can then affect the private market too. So I do believe, like, as much as owners can be taking this incredibly seriously and understand that this happens day in and day out. I have a friend who's a journey level insulator, and she's left the industry to to go back to school because she's tired of, it's not even always these explicit acts, it's getting bullied, it's you know, because of COVID, she's getting pushed out by sprinkler fitters who are using the social distancing to intimidate her, and things like that. And it happens all the time. And it is detrimental not only to the workforce being retained and contractors being able to get work, but also the quality of the work and how productive and quickly these projects can continue and be on schedule. There's just many layers of harm that happen with this type of culture. And so I just think I'm glad that it's on the agenda. I also want to say, I had a meeting probably a year ago with Tiffany Penson about working on something that we can work on all together. And so I just want to say thanks for that conversation. And I will continue to say it really does have to take all of us. We have to work on this together. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I just want to say that, you know, as we do acknowledge our sort of influence and leverage as one of the, you know, largest owner in the state outside of the state itself and ODOT. So we know that we have a role to play, and we're committed to playing it. I think we, you know, with the PSTEP work and Sam and Ramses and Michael, I think that gives us even more leverage with their work. So thank you all for the discussion. And I think we should have this on an agenda topic for the next month too. Maybe there'd be an opportunity to sort of summarize what goes on at the October 1st event, and if that's okay, can we put that on the agenda for next time? Okay. So we'll have this as a continued agenda topic, and we'll provide more information about what we are doing instead of just sort of generally describing it. Thanks everyone for the time. Thanks Gordon and Elizabeth. Thank you James for all your contributions. Thanks everyone who had questions and participated in the discussion. It's been really helpful. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.